In 1921, deep beneath the streets of Rome, workers were expanding a subway tunnel near the Colosseum when they struck stone that did not belong to any known structure. What they uncovered was not Roman. It was older. The stone blocks were cut with precision that did not match the surrounding ruins. Their angles were wrong. Their surfaces were too smooth. And embedded into one wall was a symbol that should not have existed there at all. A simple geometric spiral, carved with mathematical regularity, identical to motifs found thousands of miles away in pre-dynastic Egypt and Neolithic Ireland. The discovery was quietly documented, then sealed. No press release, no museum display, just a note in an internal archaeological report that raised a question no one wanted to answer. How could civilizations separated by oceans and millennia leave behind the same marks, using the same precision, long before modern navigation or communication existed? For centuries, history has been taught as a straight line. Stone tools to bronze, bronze to iron, villages to cities, empires rising, then collapsing, but always moving forward. Progress, loss, recovery. A clean narrative, comfortable, predictable. But the evidence left behind by ancient civilizations does not behave like a straight line. It behaves like interference, like time folding back on itself, like knowledge appearing, disappearing, then reappearing somewhere else entirely. Textbooks call these anomalies gaps. Archaeologists call them missing data. But the longer you examine them, the harder it becomes to ignore a disturbing possibility. What if these gaps are not empty? What if something passed through them? When archaeologists study the ruins of ancient civilizations, they expect to find gradual development. Rough stone leading to refined stone. Simple tools evolving into complex ones. Crude mathematics refining into precise geometry. That is how human learning works. It takes time. It leaves a trail. But again and again, the trail disappears. In Egypt, fully formed hieroglyphic writing appears suddenly around 3200 BCE with no clear prototypes. Writing systems do not emerge overnight. They require generations of experimentation. Yet Egypt's earliest inscriptions show a level of complexity that suggests a long, invisible prehistory. The same pattern appears in Mesopotamia. Cuneiform arrives already structured, grammar, syntax, accounting systems, astronomical notation. It is not learning, it is inheritance. Move east to the Indus Valley, one of the largest and most advanced civilizations of the ancient world. Perfect grid cities, standardized brick sizes across thousands of kilometers, advanced drainage systems unmatched for 2,000 years, and yet their writing remains undeciphered, not because it is primitive, but because it is too refined, too compressed, too systematic to match any known linguistic evolution. Then the civilization collapses. No war, no invasion, no sudden catastrophe, just a gradual abandonment, as if its people knew something was coming, or had already seen it before. In South America, the story repeats with unsettling precision. The builders of Tiwanaku constructed stone platforms weighing hundreds of tons at an altitude where modern machinery struggles to function. The stone was quarried miles away, cut with angles so exact that even today, laser scans cannot fully explain the tolerances. Then the civilization disappears. In Mesoamerica, the Maya developed calendars accurate to astronomical cycles spanning thousands of years. They tracked Venus with precision that rivaled modern observatories. They predicted eclipses centuries in advance. Then their cities were abandoned, not destroyed, left behind like empty shells. The jungle reclaimed them slowly, patiently, as if erasing a memory. Mainstream explanations cite drought, social unrest, resource depletion. These factors are real, but they do not explain the deeper mystery. Why do civilizations collapse in the same way? Why does advanced knowledge vanish so completely? And why does similar knowledge appear elsewhere shortly afterward? The pattern becomes impossible to ignore when you examine what these civilizations knew. Ancient Egyptian texts describe time not as a line, but as a cycle, a repeating loop. The word they used, zip tepi, translates to the first time, but it does not mean a beginning. It means a recurrence, a return. The Maya believed in world ages that ended not with gradual decline, but sudden resets. The Hopi speak of previous worlds, destroyed by fire, ice, and flood, each followed by a rebirth. Hindu cosmology describes vast cycles of creation and destruction spanning millions of years. These are not myths in the modern sense. They are records, encoded memories of events that may have occurred before written history began. Now consider a question historians rarely ask. If a civilization collapsed so completely that its cities were buried, its language lost, and its technology erased, how would later humans interpret its remains? They would call them gods. They would call them myths. They would call them impossible. But what if they were simply earlier or later? Time travel is usually framed as fantasy, machines, portals, paradoxes. But physics does not dismiss time manipulation outright. Einstein showed us that time slows under gravity. Quantum mechanics allows information to behave in ways that defy classical causality. Experiments have demonstrated particles influencing outcomes backward in time at microscopic scales. Not can time travel exist, but what traces would it leave behind? A time traveler would not announce themselves. They would not change history openly. The smallest interaction could ripple catastrophically. But knowledge could be passed quietly. Techniques, measurements, symbols, seeds of information planted where they could survive. Stone monuments, mathematical ratios, astronomical alignments. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north, with an error margin smaller than modern GPS measurements. It encodes the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle of 25,920 years, a phenomenon that requires centuries of careful observation to understand. Who observed it, and when? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey predates agriculture by thousands of years. Massive stone pillars carved with symbolic animals, no evidence of permanent settlement, no farming, no metallurgy, and yet the site required coordinated labor, planning, and abstract symbolic thought. This should not exist according to our models of human development. Unless the model is wrong, unless knowledge did not always move forward, unless sometimes it came back. Consider the precision of ancient navigation. Polynesians crossed the Pacific using star maps memorized as songs. They detected islands beyond the horizon by reading wave interference patterns, skills so advanced they were nearly lost by the time Europeans arrived. Why would such critical survival knowledge disappear? Unless it was no longer needed or no longer safe. There are moments in history where knowledge appears, then vanishes, as if withdrawn. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Greek shipwreck, is a mechanical computer capable of predicting planetary movements. Nothing like it appears again for over 1,000 years. Roman concrete could self-heal. The recipe was lost for centuries. Medieval maps show Antarctica without ice, centuries before it was officially discovered. Each artifact alone is a curiosity. Together, they form a pattern, not progress, recurrence. Now imagine this. A future civilization faces collapse, climate instability, resource exhaustion, technological risk. They understand something we are only beginning to grasp. That civilization does not need to save itself forever. It only needs to preserve knowledge long enough for humanity to rebuild. Not by sending armies back, not by ruling the past, but by leaving instructions in stone, by teaching astronomy to cultures that could preserve it through ritual, by encoding mathematics into monuments, by planting myths that would survive memory, by ensuring that when civilization fell again, it would rise faster the next time. Not progress. Bootstrap. This reframes ancient civilizations not as primitive ancestors, but as recipients. Not the first attempt, not the last. The twist is not that humans were visited by gods. The twist is that humans may have been visited by themselves, from a different point in the cycle. If this is true, then history is not a straight line from ignorance to enlightenment. It is a spiral. Knowledge accumulates, collapses, fragments, and reforms. Each iteration inherits pieces of the last. That would explain why advanced understanding appears suddenly, why it is globally consistent, why it vanishes cleanly. Time travelers would not leave machines behind. They would leave ideas, ratios, alignments, stories that sound like myths until the science catches up. And here is the warning hidden inside this pattern. If civilizations rise and fall cyclically, then collapse is not an anomaly. It is a phase. The knowledge we assume is permanent is fragile. Digital archives decay. Languages die. Infrastructure fails. The past is littered with societies that believe themselves advanced. And yet, something always survives. Someone always plans ahead. The hopeful ending is this. If we are here now, it means the cycle has not failed yet. We are the inheritors of forgotten knowledge, the custodians of fragments that survived fire, flood, and time itself. The question is not whether time travelers exist. The question is whether we are becoming them. And if future humans are watching us through the ruins we will leave behind, what will they think we knew? What will they think we chose to preserve? And what message will we leave for them, carved quietly into the fabric of time? There is one final detail that ties everything together, a detail so ordinary that it is often overlooked. Time travelers, if they exist, would not announce themselves because the past does not need proof. It needs direction. Evidence changes belief. Direction changes outcome. This may explain why no ancient text explicitly describes a visitor from the future. Instead, it describes something subtler. Knowledge that arrives suddenly, skills that appear fully formed. Teachers who depart quietly, civilizations that collapse not into chaos, but into silence. Silence is important. A civilization destroyed violently leaves scars, burned layers, mass graves, broken walls. But a civilization that withdraws leaves something else, orderly abandonment, tools left behind, structures that seem paused rather than destroyed. This pattern appears repeatedly in the Indus Valley, in the Maya lowlands, in parts of the Mediterranean. People did not flee in panic. They left deliberately, as if responding to something they understood. Time travel, in this framework, does not require machines stepping into the past. It requires foresight, stepping into memory. Knowledge planted early enough becomes instinct later. Consider how children today intuitively understand technology that would have baffled adults a century ago. Not because they are smarter, but because the environment prepares them. The future educates the present. What would they do? They would not attempt to preserve everything. That would be impossible. They would preserve what matters. Astronomy, mathematics, medicine, navigation, agriculture, social memory. They would encode these into forms that survive fire, flood, and forgetfulness. Stone, symbol, story. And then they would step back, not physically, but temporally, allowing humanity to restart with a head start. That is what ancient monuments feel like, not triumphs, but messages, not celebrations of power, but warnings wrapped in beauty. The twist is that this makes ancient civilizations neither primitive nor mysterious. It makes them transitional. They were not the beginning. They were not the end. They were bridges. This reframes the question of time travel entirely. The real mystery is not how someone could travel through time. The real mystery is how often we have already done it without realizing. Every generation sends information forward. Education, art, science, culture, laws, ethics. We already communicate with the future constantly. Time travel exists. We just call it inheritance. What makes the ancient evidence unsettling is not that it suggests advanced intervention. It suggests responsibility. Someone before us faced a collapse and chose to help the future rather than save themselves. That is the part textbooks do not teach. Now comes the warning embedded in this story. If civilizations collapse cyclically, then collapse is not the enemy. Ignorance is. The civilizations that vanish completely are the ones that fail to preserve knowledge beyond their own lifespan, the ones that assume permanence, the ones that mistake complexity for stability. The ancient builders did not make that mistake. They thought long-term, geological time, human time. They assumed that floods would come, that deserts would spread, that coastlines would disappear, that empires would fall, that languages would die. And they built anyway. They carved messages into the earth itself. That is not arrogance. That is humility. The hopeful ending of this story is not that we are protected by unseen forces or guided by mysterious beings. It is that humanity has always learned from itself, even when it forgets, even when it falls. We are not alone in the universe, but more importantly, we are not alone in time. The past is crowded with attempts. The future is watching for continuity. If ancient civilizations were shaped by echoes from ahead, then we are now standing at the same threshold they once faced. We are advanced. We are fragile. We are aware of our own vulnerability. And for the first time in history, we understand that knowledge can be lost completely. That awareness may be the difference. One day, thousands of years from now, someone may uncover the remains of our cities. They may find satellites frozen in orbit, data storage turned to dust, languages unreadable. But if we do this right, they will also find something else: patterns, messages, warnings, seeds. Not instructions carved in stone, telling them what to believe, but frameworks, showing them how to think. Because the ultimate lesson hidden inside history's gaps is not about time travel, it is about stewardship. Every civilization inherits the world temporarily. What matters is not how high it climbs, but what it leaves behind when it falls. If time travelers ever walked among ancient civilizations, they did not arrive as gods. They arrived as caretakers. And if the cycle continues, the next caretakers will not arrive from the future. They will rise from the present. Which brings us to the final question. If future humans are depending on us to preserve what truly matters, what will we choose to protect? And when they look back at our time, will they see wisdom carved into the foundations of our world, or just ruins, waiting for someone else to start over again?